Chapter 28. The funeral had been hell. Funerals are bad enough when you don't know the dead guy at all, and they're a pain when you just have to show up socially or else everyone will think you're ungrateful jerks with no respect for someone decent and kind, as all dead guys are, irregardless of how they lived there. Rotten, two-timing, sadistic, pathetic, discombobulatedly senseless, irreligious, unthinking, flakes, debauched, foul-mouthed, obnoxious, deviant, gross, adulterous, murderous, gluttonous, alcoholic, lazy, indolent, filthy, grotesquely indecent, lunatic lives! Or that you've just come for the food afterwards, or to show off your latest dress, or to spit in the coffin while nobody's looking. And funerals for true, beloved dead guys are awful, because after all, someone you'd want to spend your whole life with is dead in the coffin. And although he's really stiff now, you'll never get to enjoy that ever again. Ugh. And all those people around you, all that hypocrisy, and sycophant, and wallflowers and show-offs, are all gabbing and staring at you and critiquing your red eyes and the running mascara and eyeshadow, and expecting you to be brave, or hold it all in, or keep a stiff upper lip, or expecting you to go out with them afterwards, and let them bawl you senselessly so you can forget the dead guy and fall passionately in lust with them instead. And besides, it's also bloody expensive. It's going to use up most of the insurance settlement in the estate, and then what is you supposed to live on, for hell's sake? Even worse are funerals for beloved dead guys who are married to someone else, so you have to go kind of in disguise and make like you were just friends with the guy instead of having wild sex with him and trying out every page of the Karma Sutra together and wondering just how the heck you were supposed to live now. Although, since you aren't liable for the bloody expensive funeral, you might come out more or less even, or even ahead of his wife and kids in that department. That was the kind of funeral Irene Stevens had gone to. And the Lutz had been inconsiderate enough to get himself killed driving Irene's sporty little Maserati that he had bought for her. Bent it and broke it and splattered it with his blood and ichor, all kinds of bodily fluids, all more or less foul and sticky and all resonant over what was left of the rich, ripe, red leather upholstery. Though the insurance settlement from that ought to help her get on with her life, especially if she invested it wisely. Maybe it could finance some education, so she could be a model, or an actress, or a porn star or something. She'd have to talk to the guys down at the club. If she could still get into the club now that Henri was dead, so she couldn't go in on his arm or to meet him or to exercise and keep her body nice and svelte and trim and athletic for him, because she, for damn sure, didn't want to lose him to some tramp like that Margaret Eastman or whoever. That Margaret! Geez, she'd showed up at that funeral bawling her eyes out like they'd been best buds or lovers or something. What a hypocrite! Probably hoping she could get a job from one of his friends, or get laid by some hopeful dude there for the widows and orphans. Or something. Afterwards, she went back to their condo, her condo now, with the jacuzzi and his den and all the clothes and jewelry he'd bought her, and all that high-class furniture and stuff. Henry had a thing for leather. Leather sofas, leather chairs, a leather mattress for hell's sake, leather underwear, the leather whips and manacles, even a braided leather carpet that they'd made love on more than once. She'd have to clean out the den. Henry had not let her go in there for ages, maybe. There were bodies in there, like in Bluebeard. All the dismembered bodies of your maidens that he'd carried off and secretly ravaged before cruelly cutting them to bits.
Henry! Oh my God!
She'd stayed out of it, like he said, never once peeking into his den. So she still had all her bits, and then some.
7 vaginas.
Amazing what they could do with silicone and saline these days. His den! Henry holed up in his den like a wild beast, hoarding his prey and coming out to hunt when he hungered for food, or lusted for sex, or thirsted for liquor, or water, or will, or juice. The back to his den, or out to hunt the lives and fortunes of other men, or off to his wife, that abominable Callie Archer, who took up so much of his time. But he always came back. always came back for her athletic body and her wild sex and her margarita and tequila sunrises and omelets and steaks and chops and their videotapes, the ones recorded by the hidden cameras in the bedroom when they made love like wild beasts, like penguins of the Sahara, diving into the sand and rotting wildly after feasting on sand sharks. She envied those penguins, all that hot sand to swim through, the raspy grains sliding over their feathers as they hunted in wild packs, baying at the moon and diving deep, deep down into the dusty depths of the dry, smooth sand.
What the fuck are you talking about?
What would penguin leather be like? Would it have lots of dense patterns of whirls where the feathers grew like ostrich leather did? Perhaps she could have something made of penguin leather to remind her of Henry. A love seat or a fine set of whips and straps. Perhaps she might travel to the Sahara someday to watch them from the tops of the pyramids, Mount Fujiyama off in the distance, duplicating the smooth, slanted sides of the pyramids. Oh, Henry, you jack! Why didn't you ever take me places like that? Why didn't we travel instead of being cooped up and hiding in your den, rotting like penguins or ostriches or lions on the leather cushion and couches and chairs and rugs? You used to love it when I pulled on a leather strap around your neck when we made love.
I'd love a bite of your sandwich.
You knew I needed you too much to ever pull too long or too hard. You loved it when I saddled you and rode you around, when I put the bit between your teeth and the golden spurs, with the softly rounded rowels to your flanks, not enough to draw blood, but enough to goad you on, around and around the condo, around the balcony, and up and down the stairs, and then we'd tumble together again with you, panting and sweaty and full of lust. Perhaps I can sell the tack to someone with a pony, but I'll keep the spurs, the golden spurs, and the whips. Just a week before Irene Stevens came back from the funeral and decided to clean out Henry Archer's den in their condo, Henry Archer sat in his favorite red leather chair. Irene had a thing for leather. Practically everything in the condo was leather, or leather upholstered, or leather decorated, or something. Henry leaned back in his red leather chair and mused, thinking fondly of the cow that had given its life for his comfort. He wondered what this particular cow had been like. Had it had a name? Had it had feelings and thoughts, or was it only driven by its own stupidity, like his last one-night stand? A new thought occurred to him. What if it had been made into steak, chops, soup bones, and McDonald's veggie burgers also? He remembered the steak he had eaten last night and wondered dimly if this cow had contributed to satisfying not only his rheumatism, but his appetite as well. His thoughts strayed to the paper that was lying limply on the antique desktop in front of him. What was it that he was going to write? His mind seemed to be full of fog, like the fog of New York City. He had lived there once as a boy before he was rich. New York made him think of other famous cities he had visited, like France and Rome. He wondered if they had cows in Rome. Henry puzzled over his letter to Irene. He had to word his thoughts just right. She was a beautiful woman, but his heart belonged to Margaret Eastman.
Oh, snap!
He loved the way her curvaceously voluptuous body fit into her tight nurse outfit. She was a bit older and more cultured than Irene as well. He let out a long sigh as he thought of her. He dug around his desk until he found a cigarette in a lighter one of the drawers. He lit up and thought. He needed to put it delicately and not break her heart. Finally, he decided on the perfect words. He put pen to paper in the same way some men put knives to wrists. When he was finished, he looked over his work and smiled as he read the sentences.
Hey, baby, the sex was great, but I never liked blondes much anyway. I found someone better. Still, love you lots, Henry.
He had to admit it. He was a Shakespeare among Jerry Springers. He placed the letter in an envelope and addressed it to Irene. Then, setting the letter on his desk, he strode out to his Mercedes to buy a diamond necklace for Margaret. Irene Stevens has tried the knob on the door of the den, Henry's wild den, that he had loved so much and been so secretive about. It was unlocked, and so she went in at last after all these months, now that Bluebird was dead. Mahogany shelves lined one wall, lined with canning jars full of clear fluid and cloudy lumps. There was an ebony desk and a red leather chair. There were filing cabinets and a large black safe. There was a rack of pistols and rifles and shotguns, holsters for the pistols, and shoulder holsters and belts. 2 of the rifles had big scopes on them, and hunting knives and fillet knives and buck knives and sheaths. And cameras, a small one, like a lighter, a couple of bigger ones, and 3 with huge lenses and tripods.
So, Bluebeard did save bits, body parts, and he hunted. She looked at the jars, pale fleshy bits and skin resolved into a cock and balls.
Hitchhiker, Cincinnati, August 1999,
read one. An eyeball.
Waitress, June 2000. A kidney, Roadkill, Tennessee, May 1998.
She shuddered, but her loins warmed, thinking of the wild beast, the hunter, her mount.
Irene looked in the file cabinet next to the gun rack. The top drawer was filled with ammunition, shotgun shells, rifle bullets, pistol bullets. The rest of the drawers were filled with papers full of names and dates and pictures of people doing all kinds of things. Some of it was porno stuff, but there were other pictures too. The other file cabinets were much the same, folders of pictures and notes. Some good porn, but a lot of it was boring stuff. There were some letters on top of the safe, all addressed to post office boxes. She opened one, and there was money inside. She pocketed it. She'd have to go through all this stuff. There was probably money in the safe, too. She wondered if she could sell the jars on eBay. She turned to the desk. There was just a single envelope there, and her name was on it. She opened it. Irene read the letter, and then stood there for a long time. She cried at first, but then the tears slowed and a grin surfaced. A nasty grin.
Last laugh, Henry. I get the last laugh. She'll never have you. None of them will have you, ever.
And she took the packet she'd gotten at the mortuary. The very expensive one. The one that she'd paid the embalmer so very much for. There were empty jars on the bottom shelf and a can labeled alcohol 200 proof. She unwrapped the packet and slid the cock and balls inside the jar. Filled it with alcohol.
You're mine now, Henry. You'll always be mine.
She found a label and wrote on it, Philanderer, Atlanta, March 2004. She put the jar on the middle shelf, next to the hitchhiker.
Georgia on my mind.
See you next time on Pre-Code Horror, I mean Atlanta Nights. This exhibit of the Mutant Museum was made possible by a grant from Break System BSC and viewers like you.